What's up, everybody? Today I'm making a video on a topic that I have really been looking a lot into over the past few weeks and months, and I think will really help you if you're trying to make actual progress in your trading. Um, I think one of the toughest things as traders is knowing what you can do to make actual improvements, and this is going to be one of them. I think this holds so many people back, and hopefully is going to really open your eyes as to where you can make pretty easy improvements that have pretty major changes. And I'll talk about some of the examples I've had as well. So it's going to be a good episode. Definitely watch all the way through until the end. And yeah, let's jump in. So before I go into the actual thing that helps, or you can make changes on, we need to kind of understand what causes mistakes, and this is going to be a little bit vague. There's so many different reasons that mistakes happen, but when I review my own trading and review the trades of my clients, very often we find that the mistakes are caused by a couple of things. One of them, very simply, being overly emotional. Um, and this can come from things like your thinking, and this causes things like your thinking becomes way harder. You lose access to your logical mind, and all of a sudden, what is in your mind a clear setup, you just completely lose access to it. This is purely because you enter the fight or flight mode, which does make you more aggressive with actions as well. Some people will just immediately take trades, some people will freeze. It's sort of like one end or the other of the spectrum. But essentially, when you enter this phase, your mind your body shuts down the part of your brain that can think things through logically and sensibly. And as a result, you're having to really work very hard to try and think things through. This is why when you become emotional, things seem like they're on fast forward, like you've got no time to act because you're not able to process the information quickly enough. The big problem is as well that when you're emotional, you take a loss, maybe that angers you, that then compounds. So over the space of a trading session, a few different emotional moments, they compound and make you more and more emotional throughout the day. And we've all been through this where we've started there at maybe like a 3 out of 10 anger for whatever reason. We take a trade, it's a loss. Now we're at 4 out of 10 anger. And then we go, okay, I'm not going to take a trade again. And then you take one a bit too quickly and it's another loss and it's 6 out of 10. And then you look at your, another screen, you realize that if you'd been looking at the market in a different way, you could have actually had winning trades, and this makes you even more angry. And it compounds, it builds and builds throughout the day. Definitely a major cause of problems, mistakes, but it's not the only thing. I think sometimes people can assume that it's all about controlling emotion, and it isn't. Because sometimes it can be caused by overthinking. If you find that you force setups, you kind of trade what you think, not what you see, and you look for things that aren't really there, this can quite often be overthinking. Um, there's been so many times where I've gone, this isn't quite my setup, I don't think, but if I did this and I drew in this line and I added this, then it probably is, and this is probably legitimate enough. Or maybe you go, if I was backtesting this, I'd definitely consider it a trade, even though it feels off. Like all these things where you begin overthinking, that's not emotional, that's you trying to come to a logical reason. But there's a lot of thinking going on, and normally what happens when you overthink like this is you do actually end up closer to the emotional scale. Your chimp actually takes over a little bit, which we'll get into. Um, but that can often just start from being, this kind of looks like a setup I could take, or kind of looks like a setup someone else would take. So this, and if I take this and I draw my trend line a bit differently, and so on. You know how that feels. Again, we've all been there. And then finally, mental fatigue. And honestly, this can be caused by just tiredness, emotional exhaustion, thinking a little bit too much throughout the day, wasting mental energy on things. And again, it can lead to some really sloppy trading. I myself have seen that sometimes I've traded fairly well for a while, and then suddenly I take a dumb trade out of nowhere, and I go, how did they take that? And it often comes down to mental fatigue. So this is great knowing this, but really we need to know what triggers these causes. Yeah, why do we become emotional? Why do we start overthinking? Often emotion is driven by a fear. It's almost always it's almost always the underlying emotion is fear. It could be a fear of losing, could be fear of missing out, could be fear of giving back profits, could be fear of making a mistake, all these sort of things. And often that fear is driven by uncertainty, a fear of missing out. This could go. I don't know if this is actually my setup or not, but I don't want to miss the trade if it is. I don't want to give profit back here because I've got it right now and I don't know if it's going to come back to my entry or not. And I don't know if it's a better decision to take it off now or let it go to my profit target. I don't know if this is going to be a mistake or not. So I don't want to take a trade and it be a mistake. I don't want to take this trade because it might lose. Even though I think it's my setup, I feel like it could lose. All of this, there's an underlying uncertainty. And the thing is, the markets, you're never going to be able to be certain. You can never be 100%, yes, this trade is going to win. Like, you can't. Even the best strategies out there are going to have win percentages in the 80, maybe 90%, but realistically, 80% is probably as good as you're going to get. So you can never be certain of taking a winning trade. Uncertainty is pretty much the market in a nutshell. And when we go through a little bit more, you'll see how we actually make that even bigger in our minds. Previous results can also trigger emotion, and this is especially big when you're short-term focused. If you look back over the past 3 months and you see that, okay, my results are improving, and even if I'm down a bit today, it doesn't matter because over the last 3 months I've either been profitable or I've gained so much knowledge, or in the next 4 months, how am I going to improve? Today's results don't really matter. But if you're short term focused and you go, I'm down today, I don't know if what I'm doing works. I don't know if what I'm doing is going to continue to work. I don't know if I'm going to be able to recover from this. There's again that element of uncertainty. You take a couple of losing trades, and all of a sudden you might go, what the hell? Why is this happened? I executed fine. My strategy has stopped working. Then you get frustrated and angry at it. And I'm not saying that it's always uncertainty, but quite often you will see uncertainty. Now, overthinking, this is even more the case because often when you overthink something, it's because you don't know exactly what your edge looks like. You might be in a situation that you've not traded in before, and you go, this just doesn't feel right. I don't know why. I haven't been in this situation before, so I don't know what I should actually be looking for. Or maybe you have some rules that are fairly straightforward, but there's a bit of leeway here and there, and all of a sudden you're in that situation where it's like, this is the leeway situation. I don't know if I should be taking a trade here or not. It feels like I shouldn't, but at the same time, technically it is. And that's something I use a lot in my mental game mistakes, is when I'm looking at something, I go, well, technically this would be a setup. When I begin saying those words, it's normally I'm not sure if I have an edge here, and now I'm trying to justify it. And it can also happen when you're trying to trade multiple approaches, especially if you're not fully familiar with them. Um, I can remember I used to see situations and be like, I'm pretty sure that trader A would take this, who I know is successful. This is definitely one of his types of setups, so I'm going to take it. But at the same time, we can't know that because we don't know what that strategy looks like. You're looking at it going, I think this is what this other person who I know is successful would trade. But it comes again from uncertainty of, I'm not really sure if this is. I'm pretty sure this is like it is the setup that my friend who's really successful has been taking, but you don't know it inside out enough. So you end up taking the decision based off of kind of like well, I think this is right, uncertainty. And then mental exhaustion, honestly, it's accumulation of the previous points. If you are uncertain in general, it is going to use up a lot of mental willpower to try to figure out if you are taking a good trade or not. It's going to trigger a lot of emotion through frustration, anger, Even like if you think about a trade for a long time, you take it and it works, there's elation. If it doesn't work, there's major frustration. So they all kind of link together. So okay, uncertainty. This is this is the big thing in this video. Uncertainty. Is this what is holding your trading back? Now you may think you know your edge, but do you? Because every single mistake you have made, it's very likely because of a gray area. Because we're not going to take a trade that has no reason behind it whatsoever. If we take out for the moment the complete tilt trades where you just go, I'm not going to follow my strategy, I'm just going to buy here and I'm going to keep adding to it until I either blow my account or I've made my biggest gain ever. If we ignore all those types of trades, the trades that you've tried to follow your strategy, all the mistakes, every single one of them, you haven't taken it because it's a bad trade. You've taken it because you think it's got an edge. You think it's a good trade. And like the likelihood is that you're taking a lot of trades in these gray areas where you haven't really got set rules, and you're now in this situation where you don't know if you should take the trade or not. And sometimes you end up not taking a trade that works, and sometimes you don't take, or sometimes you do take a trade that you look back on and go, I don't think that was a trade. And the problem with this is that whenever you have a gray area, your chimp mind pretty much has permission to take control, because your chimp thrives in uncertainty. If you're not sure what I'm talking about here, I have got videos on this. Essentially, you have the human mind, which is your logical mind. You have the computer, which is your automatic response, and your chimp, which is your emotional mind. And the thing is, whenever your logical mind can't make up its mind, it's looking at it and going, I'm not certain if this is a trade. You're looking at more and more lines on your chart maybe to determine if it is. At that point, your emotional mind goes, well, I can help. And the problem is your emotional mind isn't going to be very good at trading. And as soon as it starts to help, the more control it gets, and then you make mistakes. You begin to enter this stage of, I don't want to be wrong and take a trade, but I also I don't want to miss a trade if it is a legitimate setup. And I go through this quite a bit. I'll be looking at a setup and be like, I'm not sure if I would really classify this as a trade or not. And then I would go, but it could be. And if it works, I'm going to be really annoyed because I could make $800, $1,000, whatever it is. And then my chimp comes in and goes, we don't want to miss out on that profit. We're getting a setup. Let's just take it. If it's wrong, then we can be wrong. And it's completely bypassed the whole initial thought of, I'm not sure. Why am I not sure? I'm getting these alarm bells going off. My intuition is telling me, I'm not sure. Maybe we shouldn't. But I don't have anything maybe concrete to fall back on. I don't have a black and white rule that I can go, this is not a trade, or this is a trade. And what this does, it triggers anxiety. And especially if you fear making mistakes, or if you're a bit like me, if you get angry by making a mistake. When I take a trade, it's a legitimate setup and it's a loss, I go, that sucks, but I did everything I could. It's a little bit frustrating. It's like a 2 out of 10 frustration. When I take a losing trade and it was a dumb trade and I should not have taken it because it was a clear and obvious error, I get so frustrated at myself. I go to like a 4 or 5 or 6 out of 10 anger because I'm like, how did they do that? How did I let myself do that? So because of that underlying kind of anxiety of making a mistake, the emotion comes in and the emotion takes control and you're then likely to make a mistake. So how can you resolve this? This is where having a trade journal is so powerful. And not just a trade journal in terms of the trade you took, but a trade journal that shows all of your good trades, all of your bad trades, and a separate journal that shows all of the legitimate setups over the whole day, whether you took them or not. Review the trades that you've taken and find your common problems. And what you will often find is there is a certain situation that comes up over and over again. So things like it could be the entry that you keep on getting in a little bit too early, or you keep on, um, getting in uh, before you get a proper flag set up, or it might be you keep on taking breakouts at the wrong time of day. You keep on taking them. You're like, this is a little bit late on in the day, whatever it might be. Ask yourself when you find a situation that you've made a lot of mistakes in, or there's a certain trigger point where you've made a lot of mistakes in, what are your trading rules in these scenarios? First of all, how long ago did you actually think about this? Because this is something I found fairly recently, that I had some pretty black and white rules for some parts of my trading, but I hadn't really reinforced them over the past like 4 or 5, maybe 4 or 5 weeks or so, and I began making mistakes and didn't really see them as significant errors because I was like, well, it's an easy mistake to fix, and I continue to not actually reinforce them. So that's the first thing. But are those rules, are they black and white, or are they grey? Have you got wiggle room in there? Have you maybe got a very, ambiguous statement like buy when we hold support? Well, how long does it need to hold support for? What time of day could that be? All these sort of things. Like, you need to have something that when you're in those situations where you go, this is kind of my setup, but I'm not certain if it is, you need something that will be black and white. Yes, this is. And also, crucially, do you fully believe in them? Because even if you've set some kind of rule, but you don't fully agree with it, you're probably not going to follow it. So you then need to, when you don't believe in it, you need to reinforce them, which we'll come into in a second. You then need to try to recreate the trades. Go back and try to remember what you're thinking or feeling. You can do this through visualization. You can do this just by reading notes. You can do this by looking at the chart. However it is, you can do it so many different ways. And try to remember, was there inner conflict, and what was it about? Did you have conflict over when you should get in, where your risk should be, whatever it is? Was there a clear moment that you could have realized it was a mistake before the trade? Or were you just completely uncertain of where you should take the trade or not? Because sometimes what you'll find is you'll have this sort of like intuition that says, this isn't a setup. I shouldn't really be looking at this. But then you overthink because you're like, but it kind of is. It's like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm allowed to take 8 out of 10 setups. And I've got a 6 out of 10 right now. And I haven't got really a black and white cutoff because it is technically meeting some of my criteria. So maybe I've got a trade. Could you have realized when you said this is not a setup? Could you have realized and gone, I'm not taking this trade? Or was it I don't know if this is a setup or not. It kind of feels like it is, but at the same time, it kind of feels like it's not. Once you found this gray area, okay, and you found the conflict, you need to start reviewing your best trades, your A+ setups, and see what those situations look like. If you are trading flags that hold a moving average, how much are your best trades, or the trades that you've classed as legitimate signals, how much are they breaking the 50 EMA by, or whatever it is? I use 50 EMA because that's what I was looking at today. Are they breaking your moving average by a maximum of 5 points? And if it goes beyond 5 points, you haven't got any setups like that. Do you have a situation where, okay, I've got some that have broken it by more, but normally with those trades, I'm not getting in very early. I'm still waiting for it to kind of like, maybe you get in a little bit later when you're more certain that there's momentum. So you need to kind of essentially find the reason, find the black and white rules, and create them based off of your A+ setups. Repeat this process for every situation you find yourself uncertain of. I think it's a really good idea to go through and just try to remember every single time you've gone, I could take this because of this. That's an area you're uncertain on. Every single gray area, list it down, go through and make as many black and white rules to those situations as possible. And you're not going to be able to execute them all perfectly, but at least have them to be able to fall back on and improve going forward. Be proactive in the future. Every time you catch yourself being a little bit uncertain, note it down and see, go back over your journals and go, okay, how often have I made a mistake here? You know what? I've made this mistake a few times before. Now I need to create some black and white rules. One really good piece of advice that I would give that I know works particularly well is to visualize those situations. Once you've got your black and white rules, visualize those situations that have happened in the past through meditation. If you want, I think it's a great way of doing it, but however, and practice responding in the correct way. So see those situations that were gray, then now black and white. Or even go back through trades and be like, was this black or white? Black and white, yes. Was this a gray area before? Yes. Should it now be a trade or is it not a trade? So to just conclude and wrap up, mistakes are often caused by uncertainty. That uncertainty comes from gray areas in either your strategy or mental game. We focus on strategy in this video. Sometimes you will have mental game issues where it's a case of you don't really understand fully why you think in a certain way. You might, for example, a personal experience, I would quite often take profit a bit early, and when I kind of like look back, I was like, I don't really know why. It's a gray area in my strategy, but also in my mental game, because my mental game, part of me was going, well, I'm going to take profit a bit early to make sure my win percentage is higher, but at the same time, I don't think it's actually necessary. So I looked into the data to find if it was better to take it early or not. It wasn't, by the way. Resolve that gray area with data to become more certain going forward. And I'm not as big on data as a lot of people are. Certainly in certain parts of the community, people use data in incredible ways to determine their edge. But you do need to have a certain amount of data. You do need to be able to go with certainty, this is a setup, this isn't a setup, this is an entry, this isn't an entry. Because once you're certain and you've got data to back up your decision, you're not going to be having to overthink so much. The answer is going to be a little bit clearer. When you hear a lot of these very profitable traders saying, take the easy trades, the trades should present themselves easily for you. This is what they're talking about. You have data that backs up your setup, and when you have that certainty that you have a trade, it's easy to see. When you don't, you're seeing the setups everywhere. You're trying to kind of like see through the noise, and that's where you obviously make mistakes. Be proactive in finding new gray areas. Pretty much any time you sit there and go, I'm not certain on this, that's a gray area. Write it down. Go and figure out if you've made that mistake before, and make some black and white rules. You can do this every single day pretty much. And then finally, practice recognizing those moments through visualization or juicing, I should say during the markets. And this is actually a really good practice to get into, where you go, okay, today my goal is just to try to recognize these situations where I've been making mistakes in the past and I've now got black and white rules for, and I'm not going to worry about how much money I make on the day. All I want to do is practice recognizing those areas and being able to say with certainty if it's a black or a white situation, if it's a yes or a no setup. And then at the end of the day, compare the actual, when you look back over the charts and go, this was a setup, this wasn't set up, how did you do? You do that for a few weeks, you'll get to a point where those gray areas, they don't exist anymore, because you're getting them right 95, 98, 100% of the time. So I hope this video has been helpful and it's given you some sort of actionable things to do. I make a lot of these types of videos. I've been a little bit scarce on them in the past few weeks as I tried to journal a bit more on my own trading, but I want to get back to making these types of videos more, because I think there's so much value in this. And it's also, I think, there's no one else really making many of these types of videos out there. All people want to do is show their trading, their strategy, and I really hope that the community that I've got values this kind of content a lot more. So hope you enjoyed it. Check out my other videos. Please subscribe if you haven't done already. Let me know in the comments if you find this useful, and I'll see you in the next video.